Here. I saw you walking. Yes. Ruby. Here. Riley. Here. Charlotte. Here. Hannah. Here. Harika. Leo. Doris. Here. Alice. Here. Michelle. Yunlin. Here. James. Anne. Hugh. Chase. Anya. Johan. Courtney. And Willow. And Lily. All right, everybody's here. I think this is the first time we had this section completely full. Cool. All right. So I wanted to start with a fun little thing. Okay. This is a photograph of Zola, and it's going to go to auction this November, November 10th. And it's really, really weird to me that this French auction house is calling it a selfie. You see that? When I saw this, because like I receive all these, letters or like, art stuff, and I'm just like, oh cool, Zola, I'm going to use it for class. And I look at it, I'm like, wait, you're calling this a selfie? So I'm just really curious to see if they cut it here or he cut the frame because he's actually holding the little, right? Because they already had that at the time. Or why? But that's Zola. That's the guy who wrote The Kill, okay?
Not what I expected.
I'm sorry?
Not what I expected.
What did you guys expect?
I don't know, honestly.
It's not pointy.
Pointy. You want
Skinny.
I think he was when he was younger.
His face, I thought that.
Yeah, right? Yeah, I think he was, because there's a portrait of him by Manet, and he looks a lot slimmer. Yeah.
I think he looks a little conservative in here. I would imagine him more like liberal with like all the sex and scandal that he wrote about.
How'd you put scandal on your body in a portrait in the 19th
He looks like
century?
formal and stuff with glasses.
See, that's actually great. You know what? Let's think about that later. Let's keep that in our minds, okay? So I wanted to address The Kill a little bit before we get going on to this week's readings. And it's a question we have not really addressed in lecture, but I think it's pertinent for us to really understand the book. The Kill. What does the title refer to? Yes.
I mean, I immediately think of Renee dying. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so actual literal death.
Old
Michelle.
Paris dying.
Old Paris dying. Nice. What else? Yes.
I think of Saccard and how he's like trying to literally like hunt down like deals and hunt down Paris and take it all for what it's worth.
Why did you use the word hunt?
It's in the book somewhere.
Because this is actually a hunting term. So remember, what you're reading, even though for the purpose of the book, of the paper, think of it as a primary source in English, it's actually translated. The French title is La Curée, and La Curée is a hunting term, okay? And it's not just hunting like I go out with my rifle, it's hunting on horseback. And you have the dogs that run around you and they do the work for you. So if you kill something, then you have the dogs. And la curée, the kill, is the piece of the animal you tear off of the dead animal and you feed to the dog. So see how it's a lot more evocative than just the kill? It's about hunting, and it's about breaking something apart and feeding it to the dogs. So now that you know this, is it a little more evocative of the story? Think of Paris as a body, broken apart, and any neighborhood can be fed to the dogs. And who are the dogs? The speculators. Okay? And I was just curious. Is there a character that struck you more than another? Yeah, Chase.
I was really surprised by her name, Angélie.
By who?
Angélie, or his original life.
Ah, Angèle. Yeah, Angel. Yeah.
Angel. So, because when she starts getting sick, and then his sister comes in and gives him the proposition, and then he immediately is like, ooh, and then he looks back and his wife looks better, and then suddenly he gets the desire to kill her or strangle her, and he surprises himself by that desire. He's like, whoa, where did that come from?
Right.
And then even she could it was so intense that she registered the intent, and then immediately she had like almost like a comic irony, like a cosmic irony, where she was like, oh, this is the guy I was married to. And he's like, well, I'm dying anyway, so I'm just gonna stare at him.
So it's her reaction that's
Right, like,
yeah.
well, that his, like, he would go so far as to like even have that impulse, and that it was like so obvious that even she on her deathbed could see it and then like register it and then realize like everything about his character, like, oh.
Okay. Charlie.
I thought Madame Sidonie was like pretty interesting, just because like she was a pretty small character, but
Yeah.
she clearly had a lot going on. She was pretty elusive.
Yeah, and she deals with a lot of the main characters, and she actually facilitates a lot of the narrative. Without her, there's actually no premise of the book. Right? Do you remember who Madame Sidonie is? Sidonie?
It's a card sister.
Sarkar's sister. So why do I say without her there's no book?
He or she arranged it.
She arranged the marriage between Sarkar and René, right? Yeah. Who else? Yeah.
Maxime was like really interesting because like he was sort of like the worst kind of person, but like it was like, oh, okay, you're like the like rich white boy, okay, but then like he like was also sort of like the worst in like the other way, like how they describe like, oh, he'd like be like scandalous and like cross dress or whatever, and it's like, okay, you do you, but like it was just like, wow, I'm surprised to like see like that come up for like a character I like would have expected to be more like one dimensional, like flat, just like, oh, a rich person, like, you know, want them courtesans and like mistresses, but it was like he was also basically sort of a courtesan himself.
Right? He's a very complex character. Very complex. Both in terms of gender, right, and in terms of morality. I think there's a line in there where it says that, I read it in French. Like vice is stuck to his body. Like he's almost, you know, it's not something that he has to investigate, it's part of him. Right? Anybody else has a character that really either shocked them or surprised them? Maggie. Is there a character you like more than another?
I don't know. I think it's just like overall the perversion that happens within the book that was like shocking.
Did you not expect that level of perversion from a 19th century French novel?
I mean, I guess you should have seen it coming, given like the lectures.
But when you think of Zola, Balzac, French 19th century, that's maybe not what comes to your mind, right? Yeah. Lily, how about you? Is there a character that's kind of,
got you. I don't really know. Like, I didn't know France before I take this class, like especially the French history. So in general, I wasn't expecting that much of like chaos going on during that period.
so remember, this is not a history book.
Okay.
This is an artwork. Just like Manet. You do not see L'Enchant on the Grass happening every day in Paris in the 19th century. This is a fiction, this is a construction. Zola is an artist, he's a writer. He uses words to construct a fiction, just like Manet uses paint to construct a fiction.
But it still reflects the society.
But he can be exaggerated, or it can
Okay.
be viewed through his lens, right? So remember, don't take everything as word. Yeah? Okay? Yeah, Chase.
Madame Sidonie in general was very interesting to me. She's almost like a character foil for Sicard. Like
I'm sorry, did
she
you
was
do
like
that?
a character foil for Sicard.
Yeah.
Because like Sicard like was in everybody's business, but nobody knew about it. He like was sneaky and like tried to do it so he could exploit them for money. Whereas Madame Sidonie seemed more to be in everybody's business because she was just like a busybody. And she just liked organizing things, and like she was always trying to help people. Like, oh, you have this problem. Like, oh, I know someone over here that's like has this problem that could like help you out, and you can help each other. And
But
like,
we don't always know.
well, right, we don't always know, but she's like, her motives are still unclear, but it's almost it's parallel to like Sicard. Like he's described as childish, and then she's described as ageless.
Yeah, that's very
So-
true. Yeah.
Renee was interesting because it seems like in the beginning of the novel she had a higher sense of morality, and then as she got older she got more immature and childlike.
Yeah.
So it was surprising to see like her juxtaposed with Maxime, because it seemed like Maxime was really immature in the beginning, and then throughout he like progresses into a more like morale character?
Moral or mature?
Like both, because you know he kind of like wants to settle down with his wife, except I don't really know like how he got it. It seems like he's moving. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They call her poitrinaire. Poitrine is the chest. So it's whatever's going on in the chest. It kills you in the 19th century. So always that kills you. It's true. That's like a blanket term. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, that was it. Like,
Okay.
Yeah.
But so a little moral, but remember, I mean, it's still really weird behavior when him and his dad go off to see the same courtesan or the same prostitute. Okay, so everybody in there is really, really complex. But basically, my question is just really sincere. I'm curious as to what kind of riled you a little bit, because I want you to write about something that interests you, that you have fun with, because it'll show in your writing, and then I'll have more fun reading it. Totally selfish of me. Yes, Alice.
Yeah, I think Sakar struck me a lot because despite his business scheme, like he only goes, his relationship with Renee is really, really interesting because even though their marriage is arranged, he only goes to her bedroom when he needs something from her. But Renee is one of the most prestigious women in the society. He's like the woman everyone wants.
Yeah.
But as her husband, he doesn't want to go to her bedroom.
So what motivates him is not necessarily erotics, it's
Yes.
money, right? So find what drives the characters. And remember, who is Sakar? You know, we call him Sakar, whereas René is René Sakar. Maxime is Maxime Sakar. We don't call him Aristide, we call him Sakar. And yet, if you remember in the book, that's not even his real name.
Yeah, it's a maiden name.
Wow. So, find the ones like, oh, that's kind of cool, you know? And I think it'll drive your analysis, okay? In terms of the paper, I just wanted to be clear about just a few logistical things. 5 pages is really short. You'll find as you're writing, right, Courtney? So I'm going to ask you to put your quotes on a separate piece of paper, because what I'm interested in is your analysis. I don't want to read the quote. I'll read it, but outside of the 5 pages. So on a separate sheet of paper, provide the quotes and label them A and B. That way, if you want to be efficient in the body of your paper, say in quote A and quote B, but then of course, feel free to say, quote specific phrases or specific words that really drive your argument, okay? I just don't want you to have the whole entire quote in the paper. Yes?
So initially we're like using 2 passages, but can we like use other small quotes throughout the book?
If in 5 pages you can do it efficiently, yes. It might be a little too much.
Okay.
So don't be too ambitious, okay? Because 2 quotes is already quite a lot of material. If you choose them well, Zola's words are very full of meaning, of connotations, okay? Also, this is an art history class, so images matter, okay? So those of you who already are in the discipline, you know this. When you turn in a paper, you turn in the image that you're discussing and you label it properly, which means figure 1, artist, title in italics, medium and date, okay? Those for whom this is a first art history class and you want to continue on, this is how you do things, so it'll serve you later on for other classes and when you apply to grad school. This is just how it's done, and if you look back through your readings, you will notice how things are labeled. Okay? Yes, Michelle.
So do we have that on a separate piece of paper?
Yes.
And then just under the image, this label?
Yes.
And then when we reference it in the paper, we can just say mayonnaise,
Yeah.
lunch on the ground.
Yeah, definitely. Or then you can call it lunch. The first time you talk about it, you say the full thing, then luncheon.
Okay.
Yes.
Period after date.
Period after the date.
Just to make sure.
Actually, most people forget that there should be a period of it. I forget sometimes. Yes. Period after the date. Yeah, Riley.
Is it double spaced or single spaced?
The
Paper.
paper is double spaced. That's why, it's not a lot of room, okay? And on the syllabus and on the paper topic, I believe you have how I want things formatted. My syllabus, it tells you exactly 1 inch margin, 12 points New Roman, like everything is here. If you're gonna cite readings, cite them properly, that's on the syllabus, okay? If you cite a text, if you mention it, like make sure you cite it properly, because that's like points off. Plagiarism, not accepted, okay? Now in terms of more, construction, clear thesis. In your own words, what is a thesis? Because every time I assume people know, and then I have to dock 10 points because you don't have a thesis. Yeah, Chase.
Statement of point, like what you're writing about, it's a concise statement of basically the whole essay,
Yes. Where is it located?
ideally in the first paragraph.
Yes. It should really, for this purpose, first paragraph. Your intro is your thesis. Okay? Again, don't even start with a general broad statement. Zola was born in the south of France. I don't care, I know. Okay? Do not be general. Find a really specific thesis, something you're going to argue. In the first sentence, I should know what I'm going to be reading, what artwork you're going to be discussing, and what your claim is. And then the rest of your paper is you proving your point. Because I can read your thesis and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I agree with you. Your goal is to convince me. Okay? So a thesis could start with, this paper will, da-da-da-da, using close visual and textual analysis of the artwork, the text, in order to prove this point. This paper will contend that, or although blah blah blah, well, da da da. Be specific. Okay? The word interesting, there's nothing interesting about it. Find words that are very specific to your argument. Okay? And so I'm going to pass around a handout that other GSIs and myself have created over the years of teaching that will kind of give you guidelines of what we expect a good paper to be. Okay, don't waste your time with generalities. What is a good thesis? How do you organize your rhetorical argument? Okay, how we want things formatted, why it matters. If you've already written it, look through this, then adjust. If you have not already written it, read this first and follow the guidelines. If you follow this, most likely you will get a good grade. Okay? Then, in terms of the organization of your paper, you have your thesis, we've established that. Then, if you just do a whole section on the kill, and then a whole other section on the artwork, and a conclusion, sure, it can work. That's not really the point of the prompt. The point of the prompt is to really use your analytic skills. So put the two in dialogue with each other. So I would advise you to pick 1, 2, or 3 themes. Class, gender, nature, technology. And then in your technology section, how does your artwork and how does the text illustrate it? Do they agree? Are they in disagreement with each other? Then your second topic, gender. How is gender evoked in the text and in your artwork? That'll be much more interesting. Make bridges, weave. Imagine you're weaving fabric. Okay? Yes, Charlotte.
Wouldn't you maybe just want to pick like one of those themes since it's a pretty short paper?
You can have one theme and then subcategories that prove your point about that theme.
Okay.
But my point is don't just do, that's why in your weekly responses I've just been telling you, try to make bridges, right? Because I was preparing you for this moment, and also in the exam, that's what will be asked of you. So this is all building towards something for you to succeed. Any questions, anxiety, anything that's unclear about what's expected of you? I will have office hours next Tuesday. Come see me. And if not, we can make an appointment to talk. Yeah.
Isn't the paper due soon?
It's due on Wednesday at the beginning of section. Any questions? Yeah, Michelle.
When you said that we could do like different themes, on the prompt it says that we're supposed to do Zola's representation of gender and sexuality.
Okay. I was being, in general in paper.
Oh,
If you just pick a theme, it's much more evocative or fruitful than if you just do one artwork, another artwork. So
Yeah.
here, this is the theme that is intended to you. Okay?
And so they don't always, we can choose an artwork that doesn't exactly match and we can talk about how they aren't.
Yes.
Okay.
Sometimes conflict or ambiguity is your best friend. Like, this is really unclear. What do I make out of this? And sometimes the best argument comes out of something that's unclear or that's ambiguous or that is in contradiction. Right? Anybody else? All right. So as usual, we have a ton of stuff to do. So I'm going to pretend this is the midterm, and usually art history midterms put up 2 images on the screen, and the goal is to compare and contrast. And this gives you a chance to use your formal analysis skills, and then to use the readings to prove your point or answer the question on the prompt. Okay? So, go. If this comparison showed up on the midterm, how would you compare and contrast these 2 objects? formal analysis, audience, purpose, and what readings would be relevant to your discussion.
The angle,
I'm sorry?
the angle, like on the one on the right, it's very direct, like straight, and then this like completely, and then on the left, it's more like diagonal.
Okay, what's another word for diagonal? What would be helpful in our history?
Quarter view.
Quarter view or three-quarter view? Okay, yeah.
The essence of the images are different. The left side, the essence of the image is to show or to elevate the person, while the right side is to describe the features.
I would talk about the honorific functions of photography in Nadav's portrait of Lumiere and the disciplinary function of the archive.
Yeah, the one on the left is considered an art form, a form of representation that's meant to be aesthetically and elevate, like he said. And the one on the right is meant to be part of a system that is used for identification.
I wouldn't necessarily say that the left one is supposed to be like an art form, because I know you can bring up Baudelaire and be like, well, Baudelaire didn't really consider photography at this point to be a high art, but there are certain cues in it that lead us to believe that someone was trying to make this a artistic thing, whereas the one on the right, there are other cues like the background, which is certain descriptions of the we assume that it's descriptions of the person pictured, that lead us to believe that it's more of a utilitarian practice than a aesthetic one.
I think you could talk about how both images are more focused on their face rather than their clothing.
How is that manifested? Could you be precise when you write about it?
They're like wearing dark clothing and their faces are more highlighted rather than focusing like their clothing is highlighted and their faces are dark.
Okay. So is this a question of lighting? Is this a question of choices of clothing? Is this a question of framing?
Framing and choices of clothing.
One has text and the other doesn't because they serve different purposes.
That's really important. Start with the basic. One has text and the other one doesn't. Lourdes, is there anything you would notice?
I guess the board on the left is a little bit more highlighted, I guess. I'm sure we've talked about that, but it's the point of that picture was to like focus on the psychology in the person's mind, while it's on the right. The mugshot just basically just overall like it's identifying all the bodies or every piece or every part of the body. I'm sure.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, because
If we're gonna go like simple and basic, I
Yes.
think I'm going to. What focused me first on both of them was the gaze. The
Yeah.
one on like the left, he's not looking at you, versus the one on the right, he's looking directly at you. It's kind of like that uncomfortable feeling that you get with Monet, with like Olympia. Like she's looking right at you, same with this. You know, they're both like of a certain class. They're both categorized, especially in this one. And on the right, we know that he's most likely a criminal and like a criminal face. Versus this one, where on the left, where you're trying to see that he's like philosophical. He's very like smart and like she said before, like getting into like the psychology of it. You can tell by like the way that the artist was trying to, or the photographer was trying to direct the gaze of the person being posed.
yeah, Charlotte.
I would say the man on the left is more expressive than the man on the right, because the man on the right kind of just is like has this neutral facial expression, whereas like you kind of wonder what the man on the left is thinking and like where he's looking.
Okay. Yeah, Michelle.
Just the fact that the one on the right has two versions of him, and then the one on the left only has one.
I was about to ask you how many images do we have on the screen? Because we've been saying the one on the right, the one on the left, but really if we're careful, we have 3 images. We have 2 objects, right? But we have 3 images. Okay, so yeah, good observation. What else? gonna see them? Yeah, Chase.
We don't necessarily, if it is an artistic image on the left, then it will probably be members of the higher class that have time to take artistic images. So working class usually doesn't have time to like compose and try for the purposes of art to like make images. And then on the right, if this is a utilitarian kind of object, then I mean it might have to do with like the thing we just read about, with the revolution that happened, and then they photographed and documented all the people that got arrested. So this might be something that gets sent to court.
Okay.
And, like,
By audience, sorry, I wasn't clear. I meant who is going to see these objects? So we'll get back to your in a second. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just gonna touch on that, like the way in which these photographs are produced is indicative of like the class differences.
Okay.
So like, you'd more likely see the mug shots as being used through like police officers and passed out like around like town and whatnot. If you see as opposed to like Nadar's photograph, where you don't necessarily like know like whether it's being used as like an art piece, or you can kind of see it has those characteristics,
Yeah.
but it most likely belongs to the upper echelon of society.
Okay. So the first thing you would do in the exam is identify them. You would say, on the left, we have a photographic portrait of Daumier by Nadar, and you would provide the date. On the right, we have a identification card by Bertillon, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so right away you set up the stage. And I go point, 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 point. Okay, yes.
how do you know that?
What do you mean, how do I know that?
Do you just have to like know the images?
Oh, yes, you do.
Oh, okay.
You better start making flashcards, my friend. Yeah, you do need to know all this. Because everything is going to be either half a point or a point. Like the date is half a point or a point, depending on how Doris is going to want to break it down. The artist, the title, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yes, you.
Are we gonna see the rubric before the midterm, so that we like kind of know what we're
Nope.
looking for, or just kind of like shoot spray everywhere?
I will have a review session.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So also, every essay will have a thesis. Okay, so when you see these two images, these two objects, you can say, although both photographic images they serve different purposes, they represent different classes, right? You come up with a thesis. Okay? So here, who was Nadar and who was Daumier? We have encountered Nadar in this class before. Yes, Leo, you're saying yes. You remember how and where?
No.
Okay, anybody? Yeah?
He was the guy who documented like the catacombs, right?
Yes, he was the guy who documented the catacombs. He's also the guy who went into a balloon to document Paris from above, right? So he documents Paris from below, from above, but he also has this great project of documented celebrity. So not only was he a really successful commercial photographer, and if you were anybody special, you had to have your portrait done by Nadar, he also went to people and asked them to have their likeness done. So with him, either Nadar said, hey Daumier, please sit for me. Please sit for me. Or Daumier went, here, I am commissioning my portrait, because then I will disseminate it for Paris myself, for my own celebrity. Do you remember in The Kill, when René and Maxime play with the album, and they put the images of the people? Daumier could very well have been in many people's albums. So you could have your sister, and then you could have a prostitute, and you could have an actress, and you could have a scientist, all in the same album. And depending on how you put them, you create little societies. Okay? So here we're talking about a very different audience than this, and a different purpose. Right? So let's go into Sekula. Because what readings would be relevant to your discussion? You can't really avoid it here. Johan already kind of got us started with the honorific and the repressive, right?
Yeah.
So let's be really basic, and which one's which?
Bertillon's archival mugshot is the disciplinary one.
Mm-hmm.
And Sekula discusses the functional archive and the impossibility of the archive too.
So just to back up for a second, this would be the honorific function of portraiture, right? Yes, right here. What was Bertillon's project, according to Sakula? No, this is after the commune.
Did you try to create the identity of like what a certain type of person was, or is that what you're trying?
That's a different dude.
Okay.
Yeah, Leo.
Catalog criminals and stuff.
Catalog criminals. Okay, so here Willow told us something really, really important. There is text, meaning that what Darcy told us in class. Photography does not give us enough information to identify the individual. So we need to have all this text and numbers all around, right? Because what you called the background earlier, so this is the background of the image. This is a cardboard onto which the photographic image is pasted. Okay, so it's not really a background, it's an appendage. It's something that's added to it. It's more information, it's a different kind of information. Okay? So trying to create an archive, right, of one by one. I'm describing Charlotte, right? Then I'm going to describe Yunlin. Then I'm going to describe Anya, right? One measurement at a time, okay? What if I showed you this on the midterm? What do you make of it? It's not as specific. Okay? And that it's, what is it?
Garden. What's the name?
Help her.
Galton.
Galton's composite photos of criminals.
Okay, composite photos. Galton. So we have two different projects here. Bertillon in France, Galton in England. Composite photographs of different people. Singular photograph, profile view, frontal view of one person. Very different projects here. Okay? Nadar said his goal was to portray, quote, the moral intelligence of the subject, the rapid tact which puts you in communion with the model, and which permits you to give the most familiar and favorable resemblance, the intimate resemblance. So we're talking about communion and intimacy. That's what Nadar is trying to do. Whether you call it art or you don't, he is trying to do something with his sitter. Okay? Whereas for Bertillon, the criminal expressed nothing. Right? So one of you, I don't remember who said, it's more expressive, right? So expression does matter, but it's also about a communion. It's about intimacy. You're trying to see below the surface. Okay? Whereas Bertillon is all about the surface. This is Nadar. Photography is a marvelous discovery, a science that has attracted the greatest intellects, an art that excites the most astute minds. So for Nadar, it is an art, okay? And one that can be practiced by any imbecile. That is something Baudelaire also says, even though he does not believe that photography is an art, he talks about imbeciles. Photographic theory can be taught in an hour, the basic technique in a day. But what cannot be taught is the feeling for light. Light matters very much for us here. It is how light lies on the face that you as artist must capture. No one can be taught how to grasp the personality of the sitter to produce an intimate likeness rather than a banal portrait. Okay, so here we're talking about intimacy, personality, and light. Light is a tool here. In Bertillon, we have not talked about light at all. You just assume, you just walk into this blindly existing space that is already lit, but you don't even question the lighting. Okay? Do you feel that mugshots, surveillance photographs, belong in an art history class? Why are we talking about them? We've questioned whether Nadar's portraits were art or not, right? But mugshots? You know, there could be ambiguities with Nadar. But mugshots? What are we doing here? Somebody other than Chase. What do you think, Hannah? Right? Is that
Yeah,
feel like if you're, like this is where it started, right? So for us to understand maybe like the later history, we have to understand where it started. I think it's really significant.
What started, what
So
is?
that's photography.
Ah,
Right.
okay.
And with, I guess, the other paintings at the time, photography was still important, where we could make a connection with other artworks, even though maybe the photographs that we were using at the time aren't really considered art.
Mm-hmm.
We could always make a connection, like we did with this.
So just to clarify, photography started in the 1830s. We're now in the 1880s. So it's not where it started. We've
But
quite
isn't
a
it
ways.
still like, but it's like,
It is developing.
Yeah, right.
But you say we can make connections with art. Can you be a little more specific as to what you mean by that?
So I guess we're, like what Darcy was talking about last class, where art, so paintings weren't, they're not like of nude women anymore, they're more serious,
Mhm.
I guess, and this I think ties in well, where we could see why that was happening. It's a good, I think, it's good at explaining why that was happening.
Maggie, Hugh, and Leo.
I think because we consider photography like an art today, and so like we bring it back to that transition of like starting from the 1880s. We see this shift like in Janine
Shablisky. That's how you say her
Okay.
name. Oh, I used to just call her Janine because I didn't know how to say her name. So I finally asked her, how do you say this? It's Polish. Janine. Let's call her Janine.
Janine, good old pal.
Yeah.
Where she says like the photos of like the communards, it lends like a certain like theatrics to those photos as opposed to like the portraits.
Mm-hmm.
And so we sort of start to see this shift where like people are posing for the camera,
Yeah.
which is something like that is, it's just like relatively new as opposed to using photography as like in like a documentation tool.
People started posing from the camera from the earliest instance of photography in 1939. Yes. Daguerreotypes. It was very much a.
Because it's a long exposure, I see.
Yeah.
But the notion of posing is actually important to us. Hugh and then Leo.
I think it's because like probably to learn how the medium was used in different ways and know more about the medium because the medium is essential to the artwork itself.
Okay. Okay. Leo.
Art history, I guess, is the study of like visual culture. So photography is that, and if we're learning about historical context of why this visual culture was produced, we kind of have to know its other functions in the society, because through the lens of art we can understand how the society ran.
And that is something, art history as a discipline, it's always changing, okay? So this emphasis on visual culture and materiality is kind of new. It's about the last 10 years, okay? So that definitely has something to do with it. But it's also because photography is dealing with portraiture. And portraiture is, as we taught you at the beginning of this course, one of the genres of painting. So photographic portraiture is putting pressure on painted portraiture. And whether you pose like Nadar or you have a portrait like a mugshot, it matters. And it was already problematic in the front page of the newspapers in the 19th century. À bas la photographie, down with photography. The portraits, before, today. Okay? So even something that would be Nadar-like is considered so off from like the manipulation, fiction manipulations you could create in painting, to then this kind of very stern, stiff portraiture that you've been associating with the mugshot aesthetic. All right, so even mugshots, even though they're not considered art, put pressure on the notion of the portrait in the 19th century. So then in paint, what is the function of painting a person? Okay, when we have different modes of capturing likeness. Does that make sense? So this is Sekula. He passed away, unfortunately, but he's a scholar that, we still turn to a lot. So I'm going to go quite quickly through some quotes because I want us to go to a different pairing. Every proper portrait of a man of genius made by a man of genius has its counterpart in the mugshot. Okay? Both attempts are motivated by an uneasy belief in the category of the individual. And so capturing the individual was also a prerogative of painted portraiture. Okay? So how do we define identity? It's a double system, a system of representation capable of, as Johan said, in functioning honorifically and repressively. Photography came to establish and delimit the terrain of the other, right? To define both the generalized look, the typology, and the contingent instance of deviance and social pathology. That's what Bertillon is trying to do. He's trying to define a type, deviant, criminal, one person at a time with the specificity of each of them. We're trying to create a type. This is weird, okay? And he's trying to do the others, like, oh, that's not me, I'm not deviant. So I'm defining something that is other than me. The average man. The individual could be identified only by invoking the powers of this genie, right? So Charlotte as an individual with all her measurements can only be defined as such against generalities. That's why the archive matters, because you compare her to the rest, okay? And this is what's happening here. So see this guy here, he's doing this gesture right there, okay? The task is to preserve a sufficient record of her personality to be able to identify the present description with one which may be presented at some future time. One of the anxieties he had when people like cut off their mustache, change their hair color, create a new scar, right? And that he would not be able to recognize them the second time. Because his great fear was recidivism. What does that mean? Recidivism.
You commit another crime, you go back to jail.
You do it again, okay? And so he's trying to find the ways to find the person who committed a crime a second time, even if he changed his superficial appearance, okay? And so it's interesting that he uses the word personality as well, which is something that was very much Nadar's domain, right? Because how do you get a personality out of external measurements? Johan touched on this. The promise of the archive was frustrated, Sekula tells us. Why was it frustrated? Anne, do you remember why it was frustrated? Why it didn't work out?
Was it because there was just so, actually, was it because there was just so much information about one person that like,
So much information on one card?
on one card, that
Okay.
they couldn't organize it.
They couldn't organize it how? You're on the right track. Somebody help her. Darcy told you in lecture, and it's written in the article.
There was too many for one person to be able to like go through it all. There's just like such a great amount of information.
Dude! Come on, use your eyes. It's on the screen. See how small that guy is? All these are cards. We have hundreds of thousands of cards. Yeah, I was mugged. You know, he was 6 feet tall, he had brown hair. Yeah, that's all I remember because I'm really in shock. Well, go find him. Good luck. Yeah, Anya.
The other difficulty that she talked about was like, if you were mugged, you don't know the length of the guy's nose that might have done it, and like that's how these cards were organized.
Yes.
Whereas like,
So the archive collapses onto itself. This great notion of taxonomy, of categorizing, then cannot be useful. You cannot retrieve the information. Okay? What is the object here? It's not a trick question. What do you see? I'm sorry?
The old man.
The old man? Which old man? Okay.
Facing the camera.
Okay. As an object, though? Do you recognize it? It's really not a trick question.
It's an identity card.
Yeah, it's a Bertillon mugshot.
but it's of Galton.
But it's of Galton. That's what's cool.
It's funny.
Francis Galton is playing at Bertillon's game, even though their projects are so drastically opposite from each other. Okay? Galton, founder of eugenics. Very problematic. I'm not going to go into it now because I get a little angry. So just wanted to show you how asinine this was. He's trying to get a sense of the likeness, the actual likeness, the true likeness of Alexander the Great based on coins of Alexander the Great. As though a coin from antiquity could be true to somebody's likeness. But then if you create an average of them all, we're narrowing in on what he really looked like, guys. We're going to get it, okay? I'm passing a little fast because I want to get to something else. Bertillon and Galton, two methodological poles on the positivist attempts to define and regulate social deviance. They both had the same aim in a lot of ways, but they went about it so differently, okay? And they both relied on the notion of the average man. Galton was creating the average man visually, whereas Bertillon was relying on the notion of the average man to find the individual. But both needed the average man. Okay? Well, I'm gonna skip this, skip that. Bertillon sought to embed the photo in the archive. Galton sought to embed the archive in the photo. This is probably the most succinct way you can remember these two men. Whoa. Bertillon sought to individuate. Galton sought to visualize the generic evidence of hereditarian laws. Okay? I recommend that you do this for yourself. This is really helpful studying for the midterm to have those keywords really at the ready. Okay? This is not even an exhaustive list. I just made this up really quickly when I was reviewing the article for myself. But when I read something new, I do this. Okay? Because every article has the keywords that matter to the author. And this is a way to get to the argument. We have 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes to be brilliant. Throw out anything you can think of how you would do this on the midterm. What's different? What's the same? Talk.
Cartoon.
Loudly.
Once a person that Once a person that one's made up.
They're both petrolus.
Color.
Color. Versus. I heard both women.
Generalization versus an individual.
Whole body versus upper body.
Movement and stillness.
Nice. Keep going.
Context, like she's in a scene, she knows coding.
Great.
Expression.
Nice. I don't know who said that, but nice. What else?
Individuality based on clothing.
Okay.
There's text.
Text here is really important. Okay? You said they're both pétroleuses. But if I were to show you, pass around an actual, little visiting card hiding this part, would you go, oh, that's a pétroleuse, I know it.
But that's the point.
What is the point?
I feel like one of, this was Bertillon, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like one of his points is like the bringing the individual person out of the wait, hold on, I'm trying to phrase this. Like bringing individuality out of the generalization of the attempted revolution.
And
if that makes
also
sense.
to actually impose a type onto an individual.
Yeah.
Okay? And we have 1 more minute. Personification matters here to us, right? We have woman as Paris, woman as defense, woman as resistance, and then woman as pétroleuse. From the really weird cartoony to the really horrifying, right? Pétroleuse. Oh, these women in the night who set Paris ablaze. Just so you know, we have no evidence any such woman ever existed. It's a type that was developed either by the press, by the government, right? Spreading rumors against the communards. We do know there were women communards, but we do not know for sure there were pétroleuses. Fires set up, but that just got into the press everywhere, okay? So then to impose that onto people, that's something. So type versus identity. So you all said some great things that you could use on the midterm, right, if this came up. But really to review, these were made by who?
Bertillon.
No. These were made by Appert.
Oh, wait. that's
Where?
what I meant to say before.
In prison of who? Of communards. Okay? Voluntarily or not? Okay. So here the notion of willingness can be more complex if you want it to be in an essay. They're not in jail voluntarily, right? And he's not making their pictures out of the goodness of his heart. He wanted to make money. He had a project called The Types of the Commune. He's like, hey, come on, sit for me. No, I don't want to. Sit for me. You're gonna die. You can give this to your husband. Right? Capitalism comes back into the picture here. Okay? So think about those a little further. And hopefully we'll have time to kind of get back onto that comparison a little bit next time. Okay. Thank you.